Hey guys, it's your favorite inpatient therapist. No, I'm just joking, not really. And today I want to look at Frantz Fanon's doctoral dissertation and the social psychology of disability. Now, disclaimer, as I said in the beginning, I am not a therapist, a psychologist or a psychiatrist. This is in no way um any medical advice whatsoever. I'm gonna be more so looking at this from a socio philosophical perspective with my own experiences added in for maybe added context and insight like usual. Um and I also want to give a shout out to the YouTube channel Notes. Um she usually does like DJ mixes that get taken down according to her own words, and she like posts political content on her community posts. Thank you very much to her for giving me the link to the PDF in which this dissertation is found. And Jean Khalifa for being the primary translator of this text, I believe. This text specifically in the psychiatric writings generally, I believe. And yeah, Frantz Fanon's dissertation was essentially about a person with Friedrich's ataxia who simultaneously um presented because he was working in like a psychiatric facility in Tunisia and colonial Algeria as well. Um and it was primarily about um you know his argument is basically that like while many psychiatrists have said that the resulting mental illnesses and mental disturbances, because this lady that he examined, she was sometimes delusional, she was aggressive, is actually because these people are alienated from others in society. And previous to this is what the introduction to the dissertation said. Frantz Fanon had set up um specific wards in Tunisia um that tried to make like a microcosm of society for the patients. And actually the ironic thing was that it was colonial to Tunisia. The French slash white European people were separated from the what he calls indigenous slash native Moroccan Arab slash Amazi um inhabitants of the ward. And like he gave them uh he let them start a newspaper, he let them start a film criticism club, he allowed them to like have more social events. He created a cafe within the ward, and I believe it was the Charles Noel Hospital. Um, I think this is after his dissertation, but at one institution, maybe it was that same one, he even had them make a soccer field, a football field, so that the patients in that psych ward could play against each other. And, his finding was that this actually improved the lives of the first, specifically with the film criticism and the French style cafe and the newspaper and stuff like that, um with the white French patients. But because it was separated, here's the thing, this is, like, of course I'm not, that was state sanctioned separation within, like, a state institution. But it did make him realize that the effect wasn't the same. Like the indigenous um Tunisian North African people were not seeing as much improvement than the white French people. And so he started thinking about, um like, what can I do so that the Moroccan, the Tunisian, the Algerian people, basically the Arab, Muslim slash Amazi people, feel more included. And you know what he did? He started incorporating more of, like, Islamic holidays, and he started talking to their seers and stuff like that, which I'm pretty sure is like a leftover from the original Amazi religion, as so often happens, when other religions are introduced into regions. But yeah, he started, like, celebrating both Islamic and Amazi festivals and bringing in their, like, I don't want to call it a shaman, but like a seer, or like almost like a fortune teller. And he started incorporating their folklore into their treatment too. He's like, oh, you have like a jinn, or what we in the West would call like a genie, and that's what is preventing you from being integrated into society and stuff like that. And guess what, guys? When he implemented these things, they actually also started improving. And so, like, he's bringing in this practice to the dissertation, but his dissertation specifically, like I said, looks at a woman with Friedreich's ataxia, which um is a genetic condition which affects, coordinated movement and speech and stuff like that. I have a form of ataxia, but because it's cerebral palsy, which largely isn't genetic, like in the vast majority of cases, um it's a separate thing. The um I think they even call it in the dissertation hetero or heredo spinal cerebellar ataxia. That's like its official or alternate name. And I do know of one person that's kind of famous. They're just disabled a woman named Fiona Colley, which one of you guys actually, you emailed me about her. You emailed me one of her sets. Thank you for that, by the way, like a year and a half ago. And yeah, so she has it. She's also in a chair. She can kind of walk, but also not really. Um, and to be frank, she's kind of cute too. She's one of my types. Unfortunately, she's already engaged. Dang it. No. uh, um, but, yeah, so anyway, beyond the introduction, this is how he's going into this dissertation, right? And ultimately, even though I'm not really familiar with all of the psychiatry and psychology discussed, in fact, some of the things were kind of wild. If I'm being honest with you, they talk about like the super uh like involved electroshock therapy and also insulin coma therapy. I was like, wait, what? And they said that Fanon was a really big fan of those too. And I'm like, oh. And then I remember, like, oh, it's 1950s psychiatry, bro. Um, and but aside from that, I do think that aside from the specific psychological theories being discussed on a broader level, I did understand from my, training in philosophy that it comes down to a broader discussion between physicalism, which is the idea that um mental states, like say, my perception of this camera right in front of me, um or pain. Pain is usually the classic one, and one which is brought up in the dissertation itself is is like there's a specific region of the brain which you can actually pinpoint, um which produces pain, and that's always going to be the same, and that's exactly where it is, versus that's physicalism versus functionalism. They say that they don't really care about the specific location about of pain, let's say, or mental states generally. What they care about is, how it functions within the rest of the brain. So pain, yeah, of course, but pain can also be affected by a whole bunch of other things, right? Your temp, how you feel about the temperature, your tolerance to certain things, um and stuff like that, and that stuff can change. That stuff is fluid. Um um Another example that I can think of is, my mom, for whatever reason, I think women just generally, like on a physiological level, um maybe have a higher heat tolerance. I'm not sure about that. You guys can correct me, but it's like a lot of the times my mom will heat like food up for me, and she'll say, "Oh, ya lo probé, no está caliente. I already tried it. It's not hot." And then she'll give it to me, and I'm like, "Si está caliente, me quemé la boca. It is hot. I burned my mouth." And she's like, "Oh, to me, it isn't hot, right?" That's like, you know, obviously for physicalists, we're experiencing, like, on a neurological level, the same experience, but subjectively we're really not. Um, but even if that, let's say, higher heat tolerance didn't exist on a physiological level, heat is still one of those subjective things, and you can go even farther, right? In theory of mind, we have these things called qualia, which literally are just those subjective types of things like color, heat, um, uh, you know, taste, stuff like that. So you know, um, within the psychological experience, it was the common view, excuse me, that not only did things, excuse me again, like Friedrich's ataxia, um, necessitate the loss of those movement abilities, they also came within some time. In some cases, they say, although I'm not sure if their dementia is the same one as ours dementia, but um Fanon argues that no, not really. um he takes a what he calls adapting from the psychologist Henri E. Y. I'm sorry, I know I probably just butchered that. He's like, you know what? No, actually, it's not biologically determined or biologically essential. It's not a fact that these mental disturbances come about from uh the Friedrich's ataxia, the spinocerebellar ataxia. It's actually because this woman was taken away from society and now she's being treated as a medical object basically. And like, I mean, what can I say? Facts. Like, and obviously she's gonna be antagonistic if there are a whole bunch of people questioning her and then assuming that they know what's best and like not really caring about what she has to say and making all these assumptions. And like, he says that we should we can't be surprised when these things happen and we fail to integrate these people into the wider society and treat them differently, and cause them basically to be alienated. And like, especially in the US with the recent guidelines that just came out calling Title II, which calls for, disabled people to be put into the least restrictive environment, usually in their communities, in their families, instead of literally locked up in an institution. Um, I obviously am going to agree. That's literally me, bro. Like I live with my mom and in my community, and I do stuff and I go for walks, and like I'm on boards and I'm on a board and stuff like that for a day center. And it's actually interesting because what Fanon designed in Tunisia is actually extremely similar, if not almost identical, to lots of day centers that we have here in the United States, and I literally live 5 minutes next to one. That's the one I'm on the advisory board for my county on. I'm its vice chair, and they do all that stuff too. They have like um they primarily focus on getting people jobs. They're an employment first institution, but like for the residents that can't have jobs or are retirement age, they are able to um um you know, they have foosball, they have a gym, they go out and do activities in the community, and then at the end of the day, most of them either go back to their group homes, which, group homes are not ideal, of course, but they're much better than institutions, formal medical institutions, or they go back to their families, guys. And this is what Fanon allowed his patients in his practice before his dissertation to do. Um, and it's interesting that Fanon doesn't necessarily deny, just like functionalists don't necessarily deny the reality of the neurological states or the position in the brain of that pain and stuff like that. They just say it's not as simple as having it be located in one specific area, completely isolated from everything else. And Fanon says that it really is um partly the society um that that is partially responsible for, as he said, madness, what we would today probably say mental illness. And again, that was so revolutionary back then, but it is, at least here in the United States, pretty common now. But I also do wanna add that while I commend Fanon for his work, I think that the annotators, Jean Khalifa specifically, he never once he mentions Soviet psychologists on the from which would later go on to influence Fanon for The Wretched of the Earth. I haven't read The Wretched of the Earth yet, but there's one Soviet psychologist that sort of prefigured all of this type of stuff, the social therapy, quote unquote. Um and that's Lev Vygotsky, who was a Soviet psychologist who essentially came up with, and I'm gonna leave a super super duper good paper by the ISR, International Socialist Review, about people with disabilities in the Soviet Union. They specifically focus on the Leninist period. Um, and by that, of course, I don't mean the political philosophy. I just mean the period of the rule of Lenin. Um, and he basically said, like, look, man, every child, regardless of their handicap, is capable of doing something. And therefore, or even disabled person, they said child because it was still kind of common back then to infantilize us a little bit, um and he said that they should be helped in whatever way possible to achieve that potential and whatever it is they're good at by society. And the the Soviet Union early on actually did have, they set up a couple unions which were actually traditional self-organized by disabled people themselves, wholly based um unions, one for all people with disabilities, another one specifically for blind and visually impaired people, and then another one for deaf and hearing impaired people. Um, in which, they did do job trainings. They did do braille um literacy campaigns and stuff like that, and they they did help fight on on like a national level in the Soviet Union for disabled people to be integrated into the wider society, especially when it came to work, which, I mean, of course, the United States has done a lot more in some ways and a lot less in others, but I can't help but really um really respect that. And I do think Fanon was probably influenced in some way by Vygotsky. Even though the footnotes didn't really say, I wouldn't be surprised, because that's one thing that I really do think disabled people have been tricked by both liberals and conservatives into, you know, like, the situation is so bad that, like, they're just like, here, take this, what we call sub minimum wage job, where it's exactly what it sounds like. You just pay disabled people to be wage servants. I can't say the other word, but you know, and usually not like, they won't get tips or anything like that. We're talking about $2 to $3 an hour, guys. Now, the Biden administration was actually gonna repeal that section within the guidelines. Um, I think it was in the Rehabilitation Act or the ADA. I'm not sure, but or maybe it was just general DOJ guidance. They were actually gonna take that away, but guess who reversed that? Um, the Orange Man's administration. Not a surprise, bro. You gotta keep the lumpins up for that really cheap labor, just like, people that are locked away. Um, and like, I really don't think you guys realize how influential this way of Fanon's way of thinking was in the disabled. Like, for example, guys, I spent a lot of times in hospital, and the last time I was in the hospital for a really long time was during my second abductor surgery in summer to fall 2013. And when I was there, guys, like, we had movies, we had, excuse me, we had books, we had games. I specifically remember that in the lounge, going to the cafeteria of the hospital. This was Shriners Hospital for Children in Philadelphia. Shout out to them. Shout out to Philadelphia, right next to the campus of Temple University, but bro, they had um a vintage, I'm pretty sure 1983 Atari uh Tetris multiplayer cabinet, and also a 1991 Street Fighter 2, the original, not turbo or anything like that, cabinet, which I always um used to love to go and play. Um even by myself. But yeah, I also remember we had Halloween trick or treating one time because most of the kids were younger. I was a bit older. Like most of the kids were between 2 and 11 years old. Where and they even incorporated it into my rehab. Like I remember one time um I was walking in a gait trainer for my rehab. Um and they they put me on one end of the hall, and at the other end of the hall there was a room with a cute nurse. Um a cute nurse holding candy, and they told me, you know, go walk up to her and go get your candy, go say trick or treat. And bro, I'm 15 at this point. There's a pretty nurse um right in front of me. Of course I'm gonna, and candy. Of course I have the motivation to go and go get that candy. Now the funny thing is that I originally wasn't gonna participate in the trick or treating. Um, the smaller kids, I was kind of like they looked up to me a lot. In the again, it was like a mini society. Uh, the younger kids naturally looked up to the few older kids that were there, and I remember I didn't want to go. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it. Then they they convinced me. And then they also had volunteers from Temple University come and spend time with the kids again in the lounge, watching movies, watching TV, and like, to me it was really valuable. I remember I even specifically met um a guy that introduced me to the skeptic community, which was a double edged sword because I would lose my faith, but also we know what happened, what what type of pipeline that started in the mid 2000s for lonely nerdy guys like myself. Not a good one. Uh and yeah, specifically also, and I'm mentioning this because I think it's true, but also because you guys are gonna laugh. But he talks about this one lady who, like, whenever they asked her a question, again, she had Friedrich's ataxia too. Um, they, she just kept laughing and laughing and laughing at them. Uh, and they couldn't figure out why. Like, um, but if I understand Fanon's argument correctly, he's basically like, once again, this is so out of the realm of that lady's experience. How else would you expect someone to react to someone questioning them in the way that they do, or questioning basic things that clearly they can do. Some of them actually were also intellectually disabled, some of the patients he looked at, but others were like not really. And I mean, this might be TMI, but I don't really care at this point. The first time I saw a big booty bouncing up and down my pixie stick, guys, like, and keep in mind, before I had only seen that through a screen, through corn. But when I lost my innocence, obviously it was right there in front of me, guys. Like, I started laughing. And I remember my partner, she started to get kind of self-conscious. She's like, "Wait, why are you laughing?" And I literally told her, like, because I never thought this would happen for me. Like, I'm shocked. And it really was, because I had convinced myself that that would never happen for me, and it did. And like, that my point is that, like, when stuff you're just not really used to happens to you, that can be a natural reaction. So anyway, finally, Fanon's conclusion is that, um you know it's actually not correct to just say that, both the physical and mental disabilities are the same. um that it's more complex than that, that it's actually both. Like, yes, these ailments have an origin in the neurology, but they also have an origin in the society that treats people with spinal cerebellar hereditary spinal cerebellar ataxia in this way. And um that institutionalizes them, that puts them away from the rest of society. And I mean, what can I say? He was right. This stuff is why, like, DEI funding stuff is so important, because, like, these are actual people's lives, guys. And like with the example in the Tunisian hospital of the North African Amazi slash Tunisian, native African people. That's why it's important, because yes, we are all the same in broad strokes, but in our specific cultural ways of doing things and of understanding the world, we're different, and that should be taken into account during care, and especially when it comes to disability treatment and all that stuff. All right. um that's pretty much it, guys. Thank you. Bye.